Hello, and welcome to this episode of Code Evolution. Today we're going to do an intro video to typescript.net. This video is not just for people who use TypeScript. If you're a JavaScript user but you're trying to learn TypeScript, or if you want to save time with some of your code, then definitely this is for you. If you're a .NET coder, C# person who is transitioning from C# to doing more JavaScript and Node development, this is definitely for you. And if you're a TypeScript coder and you are looking for a library to help you do your work, this is definitely it. So what is typescript.net? Well, as you can read here, it's a JavaScript-friendly .NET-based TypeScript library. It's super friendly to be using with Node and NPM. I'm personally using it now. Partially because I'm writing it, but it's definitely been super useful for me when I'm trying to do other projects, and that's kind of what I'm going to be covering today, is how can it help you to get things done in a world where there are so many different dependencies and things that you need to manage to get your work done. So what we're going to do to make this go as fast as possible, because I don't want to waste anyone's time, is we're just going to walk through making a new project. This is the actual library itself. We can do a quick review. It's got a really good suite of tests. It's very hard to reach 100% coverage, but I'm getting closer all the time. But we'll kind of do a quick review of some of the available classes that can help you to do your work on a daily basis, ranging from any collection you can imagine, things that are pretty much overkill in some cases in JavaScript, but you'll find are actually quite useful, like the simplest thing being a list, which literally just takes an array and wraps it, but it provides you an interface that is familiar if you're a .NET user. It also provides you with a lot of other great functionality that you wouldn't get from just purely a list. Everything here is coded in a way that it's attempting to be lazy. So, things like built in is we have the LINQ library, which now in Node I've extended it to allow you to basically just, on any collection, you can just type .link and you get a LINQ enumerable. And if anybody doesn't know what LINQ, you should definitely look it up. It's basically kind of like the React extensions. People are familiar with React. Extensions would know, JavaScript extensions would know what that is. It's not necessarily React, but there's a library called React extensions. Very similar. The difference here is I've written everything in TypeScript purely. And why is that? What is that going to do? How does that help you? Well, one, you can read it. You can easily write your own TypeScript code, and if you ever have a question about a type and you need to understand what's going on, you can basically, I'm using WebStorm, I can control click and I can go look at the class and read what it does. Okay, super useful for me in that respect. Sometimes I need to inspect my own code or someone else's library. This is definitely the way to go. So the classes there's a lot. There's a huge amount of time classes. I recently introduced a new regular expression class, which uses the JavaScript expression, a regular expression object under the hood, but it has this ability to do named matches, which is a huge deal and is really cool when you actually see it in action. So let's start by doing that. Let's go ahead and create, or we can do here. We can actually go and just look at the tests and talk about how they work. So we're going to go to the text and regular expressions, and we're going to look at some of the tests that run. Basically, what you've got is this, for named matches, you can define a name. And so when you go and run your regular expression, you can actually look it up by name and it will return. So in this case, you look up when you actually execute your match, instead of figuring out what index it was, you just ask it by name. It's so nice. That's actually the reason why I built the class, is because I was tired of having to concern myself with not getting named matches, which is a feature of the regular expression class in .NET. So, all right, moving on. There's some really great utilities for deferring and asynchronous code here with some task handlers and task handler base. These are not directly related to .NET, but they have some kind of roots in being able to manage tasks that way. More recently, full-blown promise class structure. It's actually pretty nice to read. It's a pretty nice read because it uses classes to describe promise, functionality. So we have this base class that basically is what the promises are all built on. You can use instance of to check and see if it's one of these types of promises, which is really nice. We have a resolved promise. We have a fulfilled promise, a rejected promise. Those are just kind of shortcuts, but it's again really nice. You can use instance of if it's helpful. We have what's called a promise wrapper, which is you can pass anything that's promise-like into it, and it will keep track of its state, and it will also release the promise once it's resolved in order to reduce any kind of memory, overhead of having a reference. We also have obviously a pending promise, which is the same exact thing as a regular promise in ES6. It allows you to pass a resolver just like you would, and works just as well. We also have something that I haven't seen many people do, which is called a LazyPromise. Sorry if this is scrolling too fast. We're going to collapse some of these things here. And so we have what's called a LazyPromise. Well, what is a LazyPromise? A LazyPromise is an object that will only trigger its resolve if a then is called. So you can set up a promise that is effectively like a factory per se, almost like a lazy, and it will resolve later once somebody calls for it. Super useful for this kind of asynchronous stuff. It's basically the it's the closest analogy to a task in .NET, and having the from the system threadings namespace. It's probably the closest thing there is, at least in this library. I've been working on trying to have a completely analogous module for that, but it's kind of put that on the wayside for now. We have Lazier Resolve, which is basically just like a lazy but acts like a promise. And we can keep going on here about promises, but again, super useful. All in one. There are no dependencies here. It does not need any, Typescript.net does not need any dependency, external dependencies from Node or any other code block. You can literally use it and you're pretty much done, which is, again, nice. People might try to compare this to underscore or Lodash as a library and say from JavaScript world might say, well, why don't you just use that? It's just Lodash, it's done, Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And, you're going to have your own. One of the main things is just, for me, I wanted to build a library that was, not so monolithic. When I go and I use any one of these different classes, it may have zero dependencies. I believe regular expressions is one of those that these are all interfaces. It doesn't actually load any other dependencies. So if I wanted to get at my own personal regular expression class, and I wouldn't end up loading the entire library because it's already, even pieces of the library are quite massive. Now, in Node/CommonJS world, nobody cares. It's like, oh, so what? I don't care, just as long as it works. Well, in web world, we all care. We care about footprint. We care about size. Hence why I have a whole number of different distributions here. I've got pure AMD, which works great. I've got CommonJS for those people that want to just do CommonJS. It comes with all the typings required to use with TypeScript. I've got pure ES6 if you want to go that route. I've got System.js, and I have UMD minified. The source code for in the source folder is all UMD, so you can point anything to it and work. If you look at the actual JavaScript, let's see, this is the UMD syntax. Go ahead and close all this stuff. But in the end, you've got this, basically you can pick from what you want. And if you're a web person, AMD might be the way to go. If you're someone who really needs to bundle your code and you're just like, oh, why can't I make it a big monolith? Well, you can. You can use different kinds of bundlers, including Webpack and all that stuff. Will do all that for you in this case. For me, I want to allow for people to do what they want and to be flexible, and that's been the primary goal here with this library, is not putting anyone into a box and saying you have to do it this way. So, moving on. Again, a huge number of classes that we can get into, and it just goes on and on and on. Let's go on and on. But why is this cool? Whatever. I've got this that works for me. Okay, well, great. If you've got something that works for you, keep using it. But I wouldn't sleep on this. There's a lot of code here that's pretty freaking awesome. One of the examples is the enumerable class and the promises actually take advantage of object pools. So for their small objects like a yielder, which this is again an I didn't mention, but this is an ES5 targeted library. So anything ES5 or greater, basically anything IE9 or greater, this works perfectly well. It's not targeting ES15 2015 yet because I don't need to, at least not yet. But all the things that are put into this are trying to provide all the functionality you'd hope to have in an ES6 world for ES5 coders. And one of those things being enumerables, generator type functions or generator type code is available, and it's also compatible with ES6 generators. And then also we have things like I was saying with promises. All of these things are done really smart in such a way that use things when they're appropriate. Like in this case, object pools will actually improve your performance, and I've tested this multiple times. Every time I use an object pool and use it smartly, it actually does a pretty good job of reducing the amount of overhead and time required to recycle objects. And so, for example, if you were looking for that, it's in here in disposable. Here's object pool, very useful class. And if you want to see it in use, feel free to look at the promise code. It's pretty slick. So that concludes part one of this introduction to typescript.net. I'll do another video that will be hopefully a little bit quicker, that actually just shows how easy it is to use when you use NPM and Node. Thanks again for watching. Love to see more people interested in contributing. Until then, have a great day and see you next time.